All right, let's dive into a name that everyone knows, but a story so huge it's almost unbelievable it belongs to just one guy, Napoleon Bonaparte. And right off the bat, we've got to tackle the big question, the one historians have been arguing about for 200 years. Was this guy a liberator, spreading revolutionary ideas all over Europe, or was he just a power-hungry tyrant who bathed the continent in blood? Well, the answer, it's not simple.
See, this isn't some dusty old history lesson. Nope. This is the story of how our world, the one we're living in right now, was literally built. It's about how one person with incredible genius and an iron will just completely shattered a 1,000-year-old way of life and basically laid the foundation for, well, for us.
Okay, so where do we even begin with a story this big? It all starts in the absolute chaos of the French Revolution. This crazy, fiery period created the perfect power vacuum, just waiting for someone with enough talent and, let's be honest, enough ambition to step right in.
And this right here, this shows the huge shift that made a guy like Napoleon even possible. You see, before the revolution, being a general was all about who your dad was. It was a total nobles-only club. But the revolution, it just blew that whole system up. Suddenly, it wasn't about your birthright, it was about what you could actually do. And Napoleon, well, this minor noble from Corsica who just happened to be a genius at math and tactics, he was all talent. You can see his calculated climb right here. He shoots up through the ranks. Then, in 1799, France is a mess, and he grabs power in a coup, promising to fix everything. But the real power move, the absolute peak moment, comes in 1804. At his own coronation, the Pope is about to crown him, and Napoleon just takes the crown and puts it on his own head. Talk about a statement. He was basically shouting, "My power, it comes from me. Not from God, not from anyone else."
So, now he's got absolute power. And what does he do with it? He unleashes his military genius on all of Europe, and in the process, he completely changes the game of war forever.
And his secret weapon? It was this thing called the corps system. Think of it this way. Most armies back then were like these huge, slow-moving blobs. But Napoleon broke his army into smaller, self-contained mini-armies. They could move fast and independently, and then bam! They'd all come together right at the perfect moment on the battlefield. It made his Grand Armée unbelievably fast and flexible. Nobody else could keep up.
And if you want to see this system in action, look no further than his masterpiece, the Battle of Austerlitz in 1805. It's called the Battle of the Three Emperors, and he just masterfully lured the bigger Austrian and Russian armies into the perfect trap. It's considered by many to be the single most perfect victory in all of military history. And just like that, in one afternoon, the Holy Roman Empire, which had been around for 1,000 years, was basically over, gone.
But here's the thing about Napoleon. He wasn't just conquering places. He was changing them. He was exporting a whole new way of life. Wherever his armies marched, they brought the Napoleonic Code with them. And this wasn't just some dusty law book. No, it was like the software update for a modern country. It got rid of all the old feudal nonsense, brought in religious tolerance, made divorce legal. He was basically installing modernity version 1.0 across Europe.
So by 1807, Napoleon is the master of the land, unstoppable. But there was one massive problem he just could not solve: the ocean.
I absolutely love this metaphor because it explains the whole situation perfectly. France, under Napoleon, was the elephant, massive, powerful, and completely unbeatable on land. But Great Britain was the whale, totally dominant in the seas thanks to its Royal Navy. So you have this great stalemate. The elephant can't get to the whale, and the whale can't get to the elephant. So, if you're the elephant and you can't get to the whale, what's your next move? You try to drain the ocean. And that was Napoleon's big idea, the continental system. It was basically economic warfare. He ordered all of continental Europe to stop trading with Britain, trying to bankrupt them. The only problem? It was a total disaster. It backfired big time. People needed British goods, so smuggling went through the roof. And to enforce this thing, Napoleon had to constantly bully his allies and invade any country that broke the rules. It dragged him into this horrible war in Spain, and eventually, it led him to make the biggest mistake of his life. And that mistake, that overreach, leads us directly to the moment everything changed, the catastrophic invasion of Russia in 1812. Just look at these numbers. To punish the Russian Tsar for daring to trade with Britain, Napoleon put together the biggest army Europe had ever seen. We're talking over 600,000 men. It's just a mind-boggling number of soldiers. He marched into Russia thinking he'd win one big, decisive battle and go home. But that is not what happened. See, the Russians were smart. They refused to play his game. Instead of fighting, they just retreated and retreated. And as they went deeper and deeper into that vast Russian landscape, they burned everything behind them, their own villages, their own crops, leaving absolutely nothing for Napoleon's massive army to eat. By the time he finally got to Moscow, he found a ghost town, and it was on fire. The retreat back, oh man, it was one of the great horrors of history. Harassed by Cossacks, starving, and freezing in the brutal Russian winter. General Winter, they called it. This disaster completely shattered the idea that Napoleon was unbeatable. As you saw, only a tiny fraction of that huge army ever made it back.
The disaster in Russia really was the beginning of the end. With his best soldiers gone, his enemies all over Europe smelled blood in the water, and they all rose up against him.
The final act of his life is just pure drama. As you can see here, in 1814, he's finally defeated and shipped off to a tiny island called Elba. But then, and you can't make this stuff up, in 1815, he escapes. He lands back in France and the people rally to him. He takes back his throne without a single shot being fired. But this final comeback, the 100 Days, all ends on a muddy field in modern-day Belgium, at a little place called Waterloo. After that final defeat, they weren't taking any more chances. They exiled him to St. Helena, one of the most remote islands on Earth, and that's where he died a few years later.
So after all that, a guy who died more than 200 years ago, why should we care in 2026? Well, because in so many ways, we are still living in the world that Napoleon built. Seriously, his fingerprints are everywhere. The way modern governments are set up, that centralized bureaucracy, that's his model. The metric system. Yep. And here's the irony. By conquering places like Germany and Italy, he accidentally kicked off the rise of nationalism that would eventually create those modern countries. Oh, and one more thing. Remember the Louisiana Purchase? To get some quick cash for his wars, he sold this gigantic piece of land to the United States, literally doubling the size of the country overnight and setting it on the path to becoming a superpower. And that brings us right back to the beginning, doesn't it? This was a man of unbelievable contradictions. A liberator who ended up being a tyrant. A revolutionary who crowned himself emperor. The shadow, that famous hat of his, it still stretches right across the map of the modern world. So what do you think? Was he a hero, a villain, or something else entirely? His legacy is massive, and it's one we're still debating today.